Hi folks, glad you're watching this. I hope you learned something from it and that it helps you on your soul journey as you traverse through space and time. And the subject matter of this video is going to be the holographic universe and holography and how it works. And to understand this, we have to understand three things. The first is the soul evolutionary journey that all soul beings undertake in manifest creation. And they have their experiences in a hologram. So the hologram is given to souls to experience themselves and to refine their souls to prepare them for their multidimensional experience of traversing through the universe. The second thing we have to understand is how energy works, and that our bodies are energy bodies. And where does this energy come from? It comes from a morphogenetic field that exists all around us. And it's a universal morphogenetic field that works in a particular way in all space-time continuum. And that energy body we sometimes call soul. Well, I refer to it as soul. But it can also be referred to as life force, or chi, or prana. It's all the same thing, basically. But understanding the construct of the soul is quite important. And I try to teach that in my courses that I teach, in that we are energy bodies. And then the third thing we have to understand is time, space, and timelines. And that will give us some understanding of how the hologram of reality is constructed. When I visited Sirius B, I visited it twice, once towards the end of 2003 and once towards the end of 2006. In my first experience on Sirius B that I explained in last week's video, I was pretty much a novice, and I was on a fast-track learning curve where I would sometimes sit up for hours doing research, watching videos, trying to understand what I was being told and how this whole darn thing works. Because that's my nature. I want to know how things work. It's not enough for me to know that something is. I want to know why it is there, what it does, and how it works with everything else, and what its effect is. And so I asked a lot of questions, and as I asked questions, I received many cryptic answers that as I got to know my higher selves better, they would give me an answer which wasn't really an answer. It was more like a question that I had to ask myself and then go and research and find the answers myself. And so after my first journey on Sirius B, I went and researched about holograms. Now, many people over the years have asked me, how could I be on Sirius B and on Earth at the same time? And that's a very valid question. In fact, one that I asked myself many times over. And over the years, I've come to understand the nature of time, space, and timelines. And what had happened there is that I had been projected into my past before I incarnated here, where I met my higher self, who is myself, before I incarnated here. And this is called bilocation. And as we begin to understand time, space, and timelines, there are many different timelines of events. And that's really what a timeline is. Time is just a sequential series of events experienced by soul, energy, consciousness. And so as our souls experience this sequence of events, we call it time. And in the universe, there are many, many different timelines and different kinds of timelines. And the timeline you're on depends on the frequency that you're tuned into. It's like a television. You may be watching one program at one time, and then you just retune or press your remote control and you watch another program. Effectively, what you've done is you've changed your reality from one timeline to another by tuning into a different frequency. Well, it works pretty much like that in the universe. And there are timelines of potential, there are timelines of probability, and there are timelines of possibility. And each of them depends on certain criteria that are met. And so in these timelines, we project our holographic experiences. Now, how do we do that? Well, we have something in our soul body construct called the pineal gland. And it's called many things. It's called the seat of the intuition. But it's also the seat of our imagination. Now, if you think about the word imagination, it consists of two words, really, basic words: image and nation. And nation is identity through image. And so by using we are sitting in a conscious theater of reality, observing ourselves, having a human experience. And we, as soul beings, as sovereign, eternal soul beings, are meant to be projecting our own reality into our experiences. But as I will explain, the fallen ones here are projecting their hologram into our experiences. So they're using the holographic technology to give us experiences that conflict with our true nature. And our true nature is of eternal soul beings. And because the way they've set it up, they've created a system of duality where opposite polarities conflict with each other. Whereas in the universe, opposite polarities work together, and the one is necessary for the other to operate. And so, in a sense, they operate as one thing. They don't see themselves as different systems. They operate within one system, and they have a certain function and a certain cause and effect, and they produce a certain outcome. Now, in the seat of our imagination, or the seat of our intuition, sometimes called the third eye as well, it's really a transmitter and receiver. It has a tiny crystal in it which is able to project and receive different frequencies. And it can receive light and sound frequencies. And through this little tiny object in our heads, it's the seat of what is called the sixth chakra, or the sixth energy system. And this chakra is the frequency of the sixth dimension. It's the color indigo. And so when we think, now people think, their brains think. Your brain does not think. It is incapable of thought. That is the difficulty that people have to understand. The brain doesn't think. It receives thought through the pineal gland. And these thoughts are processed through the brain. So the brain itself is not thinking. It's just processing information. And this information, it comes from the pineal gland. Because the universe is filled with ideas, images, thoughts, geography, geometry, history, information, all kinds of information. It's like a universal internet, where all kinds of information is available. And the kind of information that we receive is carried through light and sound waves. Now, light waves exist in the universe, and sound waves exist in the universe. But they manifest here on Earth as thought and emotion. Light waves are omnidirectional waves. In other words, they move in one direction, whereas emotional waves move like concentric circles. So they have a different shape. And the light waves are carried by the magnetic waves, the sound waves. And so these two things, light and sound, manifest themselves in our reality system as thoughts and emotions, because they are the same thing. As we learned from the double slit experiment, that we are particle beings and wave beings at the same time. But because we flash on and off, and in 1/1000th of a nanosecond we are particles, in the next billionth of a nanosecond we are waveform, we flash in and out of this reality we call our experiences on Earth. But in actual fact, we are two things at the same time. We are waves of thought, and we are waves of sound, waves of light, thought, waves of sound, emotion, and they're flashing on and off at the same time. And so, in projecting a hologram, holograms are created here on Earth. I'm sure you've seen holograms in movies, or the little hologram that you see on credit cards, or pictures. There are also holographic pictures that are produced, where the picture changes as you move around the picture, so it has a kind of a three-dimensional effect. So it's not just a two-dimensional effect, it has depth to it, so it changes perspectives as you move around it. And how they produce that is simply by using a laser beam that they project over an object. And then that laser continues and is reflected off a mirror onto another mirror, and there's a second laser that gets projected onto a mirror, and these two mirrors then are projected onto holographic paper. And interestingly, when they first came across this technology, they couldn't understand before the invention of holographic paper. They just projected it onto normal photographic film paper, and they were expecting to see the image of whatever it was that they were passing the laser lights through. And what they were trying to prove was this notion of a hologram and how it is created. But it took a lot of research, and then they eventually found a French mathematician whose name was Fourier, Furrier. And he was a protege of Benoit Mandelbrot, who was the inventor of, he created the first fractal mathematics on Earth. And he created for various reasons. One of the reasons was for mapping coastlines, because the premise of fractal mathematics is that there is nothing new under the earth, under the sun, and everything has a certain outcome depending on certain factors. So in the case of mapping, they looked at the geology, the geometry, the geography, the topography, the currents, the temperature of the seas at different times, and how these things moved, and they could project what the coastline is likely to look like. And they found that that was quite accurate in determining what accurate in creating maps, because they didn't have the time to follow all the the coastline and map it out accurately. Another interesting thing that Mandelbrot discovered, that there are many parts of the Earth's coastlines that are almost identical. When I say identical, they are identical in shape. They may be an opposite shape, in other words, they fit like pieces of a puzzle, or they might be shapes that are inverted, so it's the mirror image of a shape, or the shape might be smaller or bigger. It depends on the perspective. But, there are many things in the universe that are replicated. They're replications of something else. And this fractal geometry was used when they were able to use computers and the formulas that Fourier created. They were able to interpret the dots, the wave field on the photographic paper. And when they used that information and projected that through a computer, where this fractal geometry involves a process called iteration. Iteration is when you have a formula where you have all the known factors, but one factor is unknown. So you create a formula that 0 is equal to the unknowns, the knowns plus unknown. And then you guess the unknown until you get an answer of 0, and that solves the problem for the unknown factor. And so using that mathematics, and by the way, iteration is very time consuming because you have to calculate this thing over and over and over again until you project an answer of 0. So they were able to use computers. The computers were getting pretty quicker and able to solve mathematical problems a lot quicker. So they were able to resolve this. And when they projected the image of what had been photographed onto photographic paper, they then began to see the picture of the object that they had photographed, and it appeared three-dimensional. In other words, when you moved around this picture, the perspective of the picture changed. And I don't know if you've seen these pictures where you see a picture of, say, Jesus Christ, and his eyes are looking at you, and as you move around the picture, his eyes follow you wherever you go. It's just a question of perspective. But yeah, that was the early creation of holograms. I think holograms became quite sophisticated after that, where they could actually project a hologram of a whale jumping through a gymnasium floor, being watched by a whole lot of school children. So holography is becoming quite regular and very much a part of human experiences. We've even seen it in some of the movies we watch where holograms are created. But there's certain things about a hologram that are necessary for it to actually work. And basically that is how the science of holograms works. And I'm not going very deeply into this, but effectively you need light, you need sound, you need a script. Because if you don't want to create something, you need something to create it from. So you need a script in order to produce a hologram. And once you have the script, then you get all the bits and pieces together. Like if this hologram is a hologram of, say, an artist who's in another country who's projecting their image onto a stage at a screen, then you need all the objects behind him that identifies him as that person. So you need his face, facial features, his makeup, and so on. And through waves of light and sound, you're able to project his image from one continent onto another continent, onto a stage on another continent. And so this person has bilocated. They're in two different space-time continuums at the same time. And that's what I was experiencing. Going back in time to a different space-time continuum where I was projecting my hologram that I was experiencing from that space-time continuum, and that changed the nature of how I saw and perceived and my reality, and it created new perspectives for me on what I was actually observing. And so you need that light and sound. In our hologram of reality, our light is thoughts, I've told you about, and our thoughts affect the hologram we're experiencing. And it's in the universal sense, our thoughts are meant to create the hologram. Okay, and it works on a collective basis because we're actually the same person. All of us are just one thing, with individuated expressions of the one thing. So there's no individuals. Individuals are a myth. They're just individuated expressions of the one thing. So all those individuated expressions contribute their consciousness, their conscious thoughts, and their conscious emotions, and they project that into a field of reality we call the hologram. Now, on this planet, what has happened is the fallen ones, the fallen angelics, are creating the hologram for us. They're projecting their hologram of duality, of sinfulness, of evil into our hologram, and we as eternal energy beings wonder what the hell is happening, because that what is happening is hell. We are purposely having our conscious thoughts and our emotions, our conscious emotions, conditioned. So we become conditioned, and we become automatons, we become AI beings, where we're not in control, but we are being remotely controlled, like remote control drones, for instance. And until we begin to understand that within us lies the solution, that within us we have this energy body called a soul, and it works in a particular way, and if we learn how the soul body works and what it is, we can then change our consciousness. And the way we do that is to establish integrity and authenticity of the I am that I am. And that's a very difficult thing to do when your identity is stolen from you the minute you're born here, and you're given a name in all capital letters, and that name identifies you as a corporation. And so the name associated with that belongs to a family who are all prescribed and brought into this system where everyone's lost their identity. And so humans look at each other and they begin to trust this little group of people they called family, But anybody outside of that group or family are suspect, and they're possible aliens, and they're possible enemies, and they're possible adversaries. And so we grow up with a stupid notion that we are all separated from each other, and that we have to protect, we have to survive. And the only way we can survive is to obey the matrix, the control system. And when we obey the control system, they tell us what to do and when to do it. And when we do it, they give us give out their little rewards. So it's a carrot and stick situation. We, like donkeys, are following this carrot, and if we don't obey the carrot, a stick is applied. So we're punished for not obeying. And so we go through the system of stick and carrot, of obeying the system, and in that process we are conditioned, and we lose our soul identity. So what we have to do is reclaim and restore our soul identity. We have to revoke our agreement, which was implied by our parents. They didn't know. So they didn't explicitly agree to enter us into a system. They, by implication, entered us into the system. And we complicitly agreed because we began to carry out the terms of the contract that we entered into with the fallen system. So we have to revoke that agreement, and we have to find the authentic self within. And from that authentic self, we can begin to project and change the hologram. Now, each hologram has many outcomes. For instance, you could make 1,728 movies of the same thing, but each one with a different outcome. Well, in the hologram, that's what happens. You have timelines, different timelines, which are different experiences within the holographic field of reality. And timelines depend on they are what are called potential timelines. And potential timelines are timelines of potential realizing itself. So in each moment in time, we have that potential. So we have these potential timelines, and there are 12 potential timelines. So we have 12 different potential timelines. And then there are probability lines. And each probability line, each potential timeline has 12 probability lines. So we have 12 times 12. So we have 144 different probabilities of the same event, depending on which frequency we tuned into, which timeline of experience we want to have. And then each one of those 12 probability lines has 12 possibility lines. And possibility lines are the outcome of that potential, probability, and possibility based on our volition or the choices we make. So we can self-determine the timeline that we want to experience. What we have to do then is to just rediscover how the hologram works. And in order to do that, we have to understand that our thoughts are available. There's a whole range of thoughts available to us. But when our thoughts are preconditioned and limited in range and possibility and probability and potential, we project those thoughts that we've been indoctrinated with into our hologram. So we propagate a hologram that's been projected onto us. So we experience the same things over and over and over and over again. It's just the scenery that changes, and sometimes the characters, but generally the characters are the same, but they just have different appearances, different masks on, different personalities. And so we have to learn to take control back over our hologram and to start using thoughts that are not conditioned thoughts, thoughts of amazing abilities, thoughts of unlimited ability. And once we can begin to do that, we can start to change the hologram. Yeah. The second thing we have to learn is our emotions. We are conditioned to respond in a certain way or react in a certain way to certain situations. And so our emotions are dictated by our conditioning. So when a baby is born, we say, oh, what a lovely baby. We all get very happy. We pass presents around and we can't wait for the baby to be christened. And then we all go to the christening and we all feel happy because this baby's been christened. And then we just keep doing the same things over and over and over again. And we don't examine our emotions. We don't project our own feelings. And we're not allowed to express our feelings. Because if you express your feelings fearlessly, you're going to get stomped on by the system. You're not allowed to feel that way. You're not supposed to feel that way. And that's what the system keeps telling us. So when that baby is born, we say, oh, this is a terrible thing. Another child coming into this world is going to be, conditioned and molded into this human condition. Isn't it the sad thing? We should have a funeral for this child because they've been born. And when we go to a funeral, we don't say, oh, thank goodness this person's, this journey they've been on and this difficulty they've experienced all their life is over and they can go on to the next experience. And we should have a celebration that they've gone. So, in a sense, our emotions are all the wrong way around here. We're not experiencing and expressing genuine emotion. Our emotions are totally conditioned by our circumstances. And so what we think are emotions are just conditioned thoughts. So our emotions are not really expressed. And in the energetic world, emotions, the waves of emotion, carry the waves of thought. So if you want to project thought waves into a new reality, we have to begin to express authentic emotions. And when our emotions are authentic and they have a coherent thought wave, we can then, those two waves combine and create a bigger wave. And in a sense, that's what's happening on Earth. People getting to project their emotions, and they're beginning to feel their genuine emotions, and we're projecting a thought, and the thought is freedom from the system that enslaves us, and we want to get out of the system. And so, by creating that wave of expectation, a wave of joy, a wave of anticipation, a wave of freedom, so that carrier wave is carrying the thought into the universe. And when it does that, the universe gives us more of what we project into the universe. So if we're projecting fear and anger and anxiety and anticipation of dread, the universe will give us more of that. Because that's what the universe does. It's a more of universe. It gives you more of what you think and feel. So we have to take back control of our thoughts and emotions. And then we have to look at waves of possibility. Now, thoughts and emotions lead to words and actions. So if you want to know what you're thinking and feeling, look at your words and actions. How do you express your words? How do you say your words? Are your words filled with kindness? Are your words filled with love? Are your words gentle? Are your words thoughtful? Are your words mindful? Are your thoughts graceful? Are your words non-judgmental? Are your words forgiving? Are your words inclusive? And if you see and you can observe your words, you will understand what emotions and where those words come from. Are they conditioned responses, or are they genuine expressions of the underlying emotions we really feel? And when we begin to feel our emotions and not think our emotions, we become more intelligent emotionally. And that is what emotional intelligence is about. It's being able to project appropriate, genuine, authentic thoughts, authentic emotions, so that those emotions can carry our thoughts. And these two things are non-polarizing. Thought and emotion, electric and magnetic. In the universe, they're not polarizing. They're only polarized here because we're being kept in a polarized system. Electric and magnetic work beautifully together in the universe. They're not opposite to each other. They, in fact, are supportive of each other. They create coherence, cogency, consistency. And it's not difficult to understand that. And so if we look at our actions, our words and our actions, they will be reflections of what we are feeling and what we are thinking. So look at the way you act. When you wake up in the morning, are you anticipating a good day? What is your first action in the morning? Do you get up and go to the kitchen and make a cup of coffee, and as you press the switch you think, oh my God, yeah, I've got another day to go through, so I need this cup of coffee, or I'm going to make this cup of tea? Or does your action say, when you wake up in the morning, I'm alive, isn't it wonderful to be alive? Now I'm going to have experiences today. How can I have good experiences? How can I have abundant experiences? What will I make of this day? What am I going to do for my fellow man on this day? What am I going to do for the animals? What am I going to do for the plants? What am I going to do for Mother Earth? How can I serve them? How can I give myself an experience today that is going to benefit my soul? How can I interact with people in a way that is going to feed my soul and their souls? So our actions really are expressions of what we think and feel, and they are coherent. And then we get to the timelines of probability. Now, probable outcomes are the expression of potential. So potential exists, and that creates probability. And the probability is determined by our standards and values. Now you say, well, how are standards and values energy forms? How are they energy? How do they work as energy? Well, if you look at standards, they are energy in action. Like dance is energy in action. Your movements are energy in action. Standards and values are energy in action. How does the energy express itself? Does it express itself to the highest standards and the highest values, or does it express itself to the lowest standards and lowest values? And those two things, potential and probability, are the beginning. They're the platform that projects us into the possibilities. So if we're projecting higher thoughts and emotions, authentic thoughts and emotions, and we take control and we project that into the hologram, a hologram of our experiences, we create probabilities, and if those probabilities are supported by our standards and values, the probability begins to express the potential, underlying potential. And that sets us on a different timeline. Okay, now, each probability timelines has 12 possibility timelines. So 144 times 12 is 1,728. And so there are 1,728 possible outcomes for each moment in time. And if a moment is 1 second, in a minute, you have 60 times 1,728 possibilities. And so the calculations are immense, but it's how we project to the possible outcomes. Say, for instance, if you project the emotion of love that is supported by the value and the standard of grace, it creates the possibility for abundance for all. If you have the thoughts and emotions of fear and dread, and that is supported by confinement, the possible outcome is death. So in a sense, we create the outcome based on which timeline of experience we wish to have. Now, how are possibilities created in the universe, and how are they determined? Well, possibilities, when combined with the potential of thought and emotion, and they're expressed through higher values and standards, and then in possibilities, they are then create an outcome, and the outcome that is created depends on the attitude that one has. There's an old saying that attitude determines altitude. Well, in a sense, attitude determines frequency. The higher the attitude, the higher the frequency. So if we learn to have attitudes of love, kindness, compassion, forgiveness, joy, grace, mindfulness, unoffended, impeccability, and if we have those attitudes in our lives, they're naturally going to create a higher possible outcome. So, learning this from my higher self, has taught me a lot about the universe and how it functions. But, in my courses that I do, I go into detail about the soul body, what it is, how it functions. I'll go into exercises where people can examine their emotions and to see where their emotional lives are based and what emotions they experience most of the time during the day, because our emotions change. We wake up with, and we have different emotional experiences, and our emotional responses are usually a projection of the conditioning we have. So by examining one's emotions, and I do an exercise with the students where they can look at and do a self-evaluation of their emotions, and they can then see which emotions they experience most of the day, and so they can begin to self-correct. Because if you don't know which emotions you are more attached to, and you do that through self-examination, you can examine which emotions you experience most of your life, and then juxtapose that with the emotions that you would like to experience most of your life. you can then adjust your emotional intelligence so that, and then you begin to practice those emotions and feel those emotions. And so what does it feel like to feel gentleness? Are my emotions harsh? Am I self-judging? Are emotions condemning? Do I look at the world with anger? And so by examining one's responses to different situations, you can see the potential, the probability, and the possibility. And each one of those is a different timeline. So we exist in every one of those timelines. So the 1,728 of ourselves having different experiences in the universe. And we have to learn to jump into a higher timeline of experience and to become ourselves in those other timelines, in higher dimensional timelines. Like I took a timeline jump to become more like myself, Ismir. But I had the living example of what it was, who Ismir is, who my higher self was. So it was a lot easier for me to become my higher self. And so I was able to take that leap across space and time and project my energy in a different direction. And that is very powerful, because in the short space of time that I've been on, on the internet, I've seen amazing changes. From 2014 to 2020, it's like night and day. But if more and more people combine and they create a collective energy where there is an agreement between them that this is what we want to experience. We no longer want to experience what we've been experiencing, and we are determined to change those experiences, not by power, not by might, but by the soul energy that exists in the universe, that is there waiting for us to express ourselves so that it can give us more of what we truly desire. I hope you begin to understand that, and I'm going to give you all a gift for the next week. I'm going to make my course on the Attitudes of Mastery freely available. So we're going to change the cost to $0, and I'll put a link below where you can actually go in and if you would like to connect and like to do more work on mastering the hologram, you can go into that course, and for the next week it'll be free for everyone. So go in and fill your boots, and much love and respect you all, and see you on the next timeline.